Hey everyone, welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of FMTraining.tv, where every day is an exciting day about learning the FileMaker platform, the Claris FileMaker platform in the Claris Pro for building in the Claris room called Nancy Drew's. Today's a very exciting day. Was going to be a Claris day. Claris is busy in kind of launch mode. I don't say launch mode quite yet, but it's kind of funny. So we are going to be broadcasting day to day, back to back, every day about the new version of FileMaker when that day comes. It's not immediately today or tomorrow, next week. Today's conversation, tomorrow's going to be kind of an open Q&A with bombs, what's left of bomb action. Today is pivot tables. We've been wanting to do this for a while, but we were holding it in reserve in case Claris choked, which they did. So the emergency backup Calvin has been activated. Beep, beep, beep. Activate backup Calvin. Go.
Okay. So
what is a
looking
pivot
at
table? This is why I was
pivot
going to tell people. What is a pivot table? Why should I give a
Yeah, so a pivot table is a table that we use to display data, usually reports or data that we don't necessarily store, but it combines data maybe from a couple different tables, and you can kind of think of it in the same ballpark as the virtual list. And so when we think about the virtual list, it's a list of data that we store in a global, and we display it in a table. So here we've got a table, and I'll just kind of go into layout mode to show you what's going on here. I would just call it virtual list. And we've got these two fields, columns, and it actually is one field that's a repeating field. And we'll notice here that depending on which button I select, we see different data in this table. Now it's not storing the data; it's just displaying it, and it's storing it's temporarily putting the data in a global. So if you had this running on the server, one person could see one set of data while another person is seeing another set of data at the same time using the same table.
Okay, can you go back and look at that field real quick for us?
Yeah.
Let's my microphone here. Sorry for the noise. So columns is a global. Is that what you're saying?
No, columns is not a global. But if we look at the columns, we'll see that it is pointing to a global field. So columns is a calculation field, but this data field is global. And that's the global field that's temporarily storing the record or the data from multiple records, maybe multiple tables, and displaying it in a way that we want to see it. So the columns is just grabbing the data from this field, the data field, and putting it in a way we can see it in our table.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick. So go back to that field definition where you see the 100. That's kind of unusual. And most developers don't like to use repeating fields. Back before FileMaker became relational in version 3, FileMaker Pro 3 in 1993 or 94, FileMaker 3 became kind of this relational deal. It works kind of the way it does now. Before that, it was really a flat file system, and we used to create these extra lines of related data that weren't really related. We have these things that look like line items, and it was a field, and you'd put so many repetitions in it. For those of you who are math majors or English majors or something like that, it's a one-dimensional array. So if you've ever done linear algebra, any of that kind of fancy gee whiz from college, or maybe you're an active engineer doing engineering work, a one-dimensional array, right? So it's a box, and imagine, like we always talk about the shoebox. I'm holding my hand up here, a shoebox. Imagine a shoebox, then connected to it, like glued to it, is 99 additional shoeboxes. So here's the deal. Whenever you have a field by itself, understand that that's a single shoebox. Notice you have the brackets right here. I'm going to draw on the screen right here real quick. And I'm going to drag this out a little bit. This one right here. See that? Now down here, there is a parentheses and a number in there. There's always a parentheses and number. See it? You don't see it because they're all one. They're all one. There's a single box there for you to use. This one, it says, well, you get the single box, and I want 99 more just like it that are kind of reserved in memory and ready to go. Does that make sense? And so you don't see the rest of these, but in this case, you are. And so imagine a shoebox and then 99 more shoeboxes glued to it. So wherever one goes, they all kind of go together as I wave my hands around, right? They're all attached. Most of the time, we always have a 1. You don't see it. So FileMaker says, oh, it's a 1. I'm not going to show you the 1 because it's kind of redundant or unnecessary. But at the end of the day, they're all 1. And so you're like, oh. So then if it's more than 1, it'll show you. So if you have 2 or 3 or 5 or 10,000. I don't know if you could do 10,000, but you'd have some number in there. Does that make sense, everyone? So sorry. Keep going.
Yeah,
You're doing
and
great.
like you're saying, it's kind of from an older a carryover from when FileMaker didn't support wasn't relational, and but so this is one I actually don't use repetitions and avoid repetitions for storing data, and if I run into them, I as quickly as I can remove them. And I've got some projects I'm working on that I didn't
Some
start where
customers that loaded repetitions.
I'm
And the
trying to get those
problem
repetitions out of
here's the
there.
real quick. So I'm going to wave my hands for everyone because some of you don't know this. I'm going to wave my hands some more, Marcus. You want to make me bigger or whatever. So here's the deal is that remember I said the shoe boxes. So if you have a field, you define a field or a variable and it has a repetition of one, it's not going to show you the one, but it's one there. And then, and so then I say, well, if you have like, you have 5 repetitions, Calvin has 100. So it's the one you have plus a total of 100. So it's 99 more. They're all glued together. They're not separatable really. And so when Calvin said, I try to get rid of them and not store data in them, the reason you don't store data in them is that if you actually had 100 shoe boxes glued together and the side was open so you could put shoes in and out of the shoe boxes all the way down, as a storage mechanism, that's a giant pain in the ass because what we would do before relational databases, we would have had 100 related records, right? 100, you'd have the one shoe box and 100 different related records. And because each box is in its own record, you can omit it from the found set, change the sort order, all that kind of shit. They're all glued to, if those shoe boxes are glued together, you can't, well, get rid of 13 through 21. No, they're glued together. You can't unglue them. I don't like that. We didn't ask you if you liked it. It's just the way it is. It's physics. It's a one-dimensional array. And so what we do with, and so he doesn't like repeating fields generally anymore. But back in the old days, if you had an invoice and you had 20 slices on an invoice, invoice, and then you had 20 line items on invoice. This is before Calvin. You were 5 years old when this was all going on. Okay. You would have these fields like a description and a SKU and a price, and you would set them for like 20. So they would repeat down the page 20 times down the page. And then you get down there and you say like, well, item number 5, we're going to not buy it. We canceled. We're changing our mind. We're not buying item 5. Remove item 5 and have everything slide up. No, it's glued in. You can blank it out. Well, then we have this weird blank spot. That doesn't look very professional. FileMaker's not very professional. Right? Welcome to the world of circa 1990. Okay? It just is. And then it got way better. But there are these times where a one-dimensional array is useful, especially if you can dynamically have it populate itself, which is what's going on. So for those of you wondering about this, Calvin's at a very, with the progression of learning today is very mid-level to senior level. I'm trying to make it more applicable to people who are smarter than, or like me. I'm not a very smart person. I'm much less smart than Calvin. Calvin's much better at this than I am. So I try to dumb it down so I at least understand it. So I'm saying this for my benefit. If it helps some of you, awesome. All right, you may resume, Calvin.
Okay.
So those 100 are glued together and cannot be separated at all, ever.
But what's nice about this, because we're not actually typing in them, they're pulling from that global field.
They're self-configuring. They're
Yeah, because it's calculation.
Right? I mean, self-populating.
So whatever's in that whatever's in this field here is what we're seeing. So if we change this,
yeah, self-populate was the correct word, not the other word.
Is that right?
Calvin, did you lose your brain? I'm over here. There we go.
Okay.
Oh yeah, yes.
There we go. So, it didn't refresh it. That's interesting. Let me see if I can get that to refresh.
You have a bug in your code?
Maybe. I thought changing the field there would change it. But what we see here is that changing this field with these buttons is updating that. Now, it's not really like, this is just kind of showing you basically how it works with showing these different values in here. And putting those values in this regular field is showing it in a list. Now we could get really fancy with this and start showing more data. So using the same table, the same column records, or column repeating field, we are going to generate a report. And I say I want sales stats by year. So now what we have here is this. Let's go back into layout mode. We'll see we've got the same columns, column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it goes all the way to 14. So we have a total and the 12 months. And here we're seeing all of the sales totals from an invoices table. So this is an invoices table just like the one you would find in FM Starting Point. In fact, if you're using FM Starting Point, you can copy these scripts and these tables into FM Starting Point, and it will total your invoices. You can see what's going on there. So we see we've got the last 4 years here and the totals for each of these. Now this data is stored individually in each of these invoices, but it's not summarized by month, and and we're seeing it in columns from right to left or left to right, which is not something that which is hard to build in FileMaker. There's no report feature that will do this automatically to summarize your data in columns like this by month. So what's going on here? We are generating this report and putting it in just this giant text block. You'll see each column is separated by a comma. So it's almost like a comma separated list. And then we've got a return between each row of data. So our columns are split up by commas, and our rows are split up by returns, which makes it a little easier to view. Do we have any questions about that before we look at the script that generates this?
Does it use repeating fields to create this? Like this sideways?
It uses repeating fields to display the data. It doesn't use repeating fields to generate the data. So if we look in this table, the invoices table, which is copied right out of FM Starting Point, you'll notice there's no repeating fields here.
So,
but if we go
coming out of invoices, what you're saying, Calvin? This data is the invoices. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. But if we look here in our pivot table, we'll see that we'll see these columns, and then each of these numbers is a repetition. So we got column 1, column 2, and column 3 through 14.
Hey, Calvin, could you do me a favor since we're having fun with this? Can you just go to a browser, type wiki, type WIKI, and type the word pivot table and see what it gives us for a definition? Let's see. Pivot table is a table of values aggregated by counting rather than summing, average, and a pivot table aggregation groups, more extensive database with one more discrete category. Yeah, so the short version of what they're saying here is that if you go back to your database over here, is that normally we if we were going to display this, we would go 2021, and then under 2021 would be like sub summaries of like January underneath there, right? So if I'm drawing over, someone's asking kind of a little bit about this. We didn't really answer this. Oop. Can you go back?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought, yeah.
Yeah, so right here. So you would have this right here, then you'd have January and February and March and April and May, June, July, and then you'd have the next year, 2022. So it's kind of organized vertically like this, and it'd probably be a narrow band of values that would be really long this way vertically. So the idea is that you take this long vertical thing and you pivot at 90 degrees, and so you start getting totals that laterally scoot across the screen, left to right. And some things go down, right? You can decide how you want that to work, but otherwise you'd have one column in most data, in Excel and most data systems, right? So they're breaking this out laterally left to right as well as vertically. And we're back to this idea of horizontal portals, right? And people always ask, how come there's no horizontal portal? Every time Rick Kalman shows up, that question always comes up because people want to be able to display things laterally sideways in addition to up and down, right? But Claris hasn't really built that fundamentally in the product as a base part of the feature. So to do a pivot table, we have to do some coding and scripting, which is what Calvin's doing. That makes sense? So the source data here is coming out of invoices, right? And then he has to run a calculation somehow is going to populate this data. So that's what he's trying to explain to us. There you go.
And one thing, maybe this is why repeating fields are so useful for this, is that the repeating field you can have go either direction. So
Yeah.
if you look at
Double
the
click and show that. It's such an obscure thing right there. Here you go. Over
yeah,
here.
you can go up and down, or you can go left to right or up and down. And it's I think it's the only thing in FileMaker that does that. I guess what is it? The button bars do that too.
Yeah, button bars do that. Couple things.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I did not. Okay, I'm gonna hit.
That was me. I was trying to do Command Z.
Okay, you unzoomed. You restored all my scribbles.
I'm going to revert layout.
Oh, there we go.
Permanently discard. Yes. There we go. So hopefully that didn't really.
So hopefully
kill
that
it.
people understand that. So we're getting basically these are lateral, horizontal subsummaries, is what these are effectively.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what it is. Normally subsummaries go up and down. And this is, nice to have, and this comes up all the time. People want to know how to do this. It's not an uncommon request. So
Right. So how's this happen? If we go to the generate report, I have, and I'm just using scripts to do this, no execute SQL. And it's going through here. It starts by going to our invoices, showing all and sorting. So the reason why it's showing all is so that it can grab the first year in our data set. And then it defines the row. So that's along the top by the year, and performs a find. And then it gets our what is it? It starts going through our months for that year and does a find for each month. So the first find that it did was for January. So you can see we got 2 invoices for January. And then the next find that it's going to do is going to be for February. So it goes through there. I'm just going to jump to 49. So there it went through all of them. We're done with 2021. And it's going to set those variables. And here you'll see we're putting the data into this data variable. So this is what we're going to set in that data field later. So here is all of,
So what back up? So this script right here is setting the data field or data variable. Is that what you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then at the end, it's going to put that data into our global field and return to the virtual list layout. And then
okay, back up. So remember that let function we saw somewhere? Remember we had a field definition, the column.
Oh yeah.
This is part of the same demo, right? Same demo here? Or is it different?
Yes.
Okay, so back up. So the script bakes the data into the data
field.
The data field. It makes that. Then that let function parses that into the repeating fields, correct?
Right.
And then the repeating fields are displayed over here. So the sequence is, so run us through the sequence logically so everyone follows. Step 1 is run script, yes?
Yeah, so step 1 is running the script.
Okay.
That loops through all of the years that we have in our data set and finds the totals for each month. And then when it's done, it sets it in this when it's done, it sets it in this data field.
Okay.
And so if so it sets it there, then it returns to the virtual list and finds all the records that have data in them, and displays it for us.
Okay. So so then that let calculation fires at the end to display this, right? So in sequence, right? It's script, then go to the layout, and then layout has to display that field, the repeating field, and the repeating field goes, oh, I need this data to display, and it processes it. It's kind of a sequence here. So once again, this is unnatural acts with a FileMaker solution to get it to do stuff horizontally. Use virtual list because it's faster than using fields, right? David Angel wants to ask about performance and stuff like that.
Performance.
Because virtual list is in memory as opposed to being saved to the drive. So
Yeah, I don't. This could be so as far as performance, it's more about displaying data in a way that wouldn't be possible in another way. I guess you could do something crazy with summary unstored calculations to do something similar. That would be crazy, and yeah, it would be a huge drag on performance. And if this is running locally, I only have 6,000 records. So if you had this hosted on a server and you had 1,000,000 records, it's going to be faster if you run these scripts with PSOS, perform script on server, and just return the results. Because we are doing a find and looking at summary fields for each of these
so
years and each of these months.
the script that runs, you would have it return that the data returning would be that the data variable, right? It would return that. Then you'd
Right.
process that. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. Margaret posted virtual list. Is this file in the virtual list or is that a separate file, Margaret? What'd you post there?
This is the original Calvin pivot table file. I assume that he'll give me an updated version of what he's looking at the moment.
Okay,
But
so it's
Yeah, I can send you a link when this is done.
yeah.
yeah, okay. It's interesting we call it because virtual lists and pivot tables to me are generally separate topics. So I'm kind of wondering why pivot tables is called virtual list, but whatever. So I'm looking at the download link in
I
Discord.
think we use a virtual list to generate the pivot table. Would that be right?
Yeah, probably. That's well, yeah. Your virtual list is that script that the results of that script are a virtual list essentially, right? Um, real quick for David Angel. So as a general rule, using variables and global fields will result in data being retained locally. However, I am aware that if you put an image or a PDF or something in a global container and it's a hosted solution, so the goal is if it's global, it doesn't go back to the server. There are situations, and I'm not totally clear on them, where even though you're saving data into a global container and it would never be saved to the server, stupid FileMaker Pro sends it back to the server. And so you're waiting, you've clogged the toilet with this giant container and you used it in such a way that you wouldn't clog it, but it clogs anyway. It says, we're not going to save it on the server, but let me send it to the server anyway. I have got to get with engineering and find out why that is, because that's really a bad thing, right? Because the reason we use
That's interesting.
is to either have other people not see it or as a performance enhancing sort of deal, right? Makes sense. So yeah. Peter Gaines has a question, Margaret.
He does. What TO are you on, and what happens with the 105 records when you run the script again?
What TO? So there's
What
this is
layout were
really
you on for that?
simple. We are just on virtual list, and the other TO is invoices that was copied from FM starting point. So the virtual list, if I select Command J, we're going to see all of the records. And you'll notice at the end of that script, we had a find. And what that find is doing, perform find. So it finds records that have data in it. Because we only have however many rows of data here, then only the records with data are going to
Okay,
have
that's a
data
dumb question. So
calculation.
you had like 105 pre-baked records that are kind of like repositories waiting to take this data.
Mhm.
But how do you? Because I'm gonna channel Peter Gaines because he's probably gonna ask this question. I'm asking anyway. How do you know that you wanted 105? What if I need 111? And what the hell? Like, wouldn't you delete all of them and then create the ones you needed only? Why are we pre-baking 105, and why is 105 such a special number?
Yeah. So 105 is just how many I created. It's arbitrary. And I knew it was going to be enough for the demo. And I think I even have a script in here that just creates 100. Yeah, create 100 records. And it just stops creating records after
So
100.
wait, back up. So what if it's doing this, run the scripts running and it's creating all this data and it creates 110 virtual rows worth of stuff, which will need 110 real records to display. Is it going to be 5 short? Is it no? It doesn't
It's
have.
going to be five. Yeah. So I don't have a mechanism in here. You could put a mechanism in that
All
would
right. So
create the
this is
extra
Peter
records.
Gaines. This is smoke and mirrors and bull. Is what you just saw. Okay. So it's all correct. But really, people would do either you create a bunch of records, like 1,000 records, so you'd never run out, because
Mhm.
110 is within an order of magnitude of 20 or 30. I could see you running out, right? Does that make sense? Right, Calvin, right? We can see that. So either
Yeah.
you'd have like 1,000 that were always available, or you would purge the records and recreate them just the number you needed every time if you were going to do this solution. But Calvin threw together a demo, so
Hmm.
there's parts that are not really important parts of the demo, which we're talking about one, but it is confusing, right? So I'm not
Yeah, and
like Calvin.
we could have it create the records every time. The one
Right.
thing that we would need to do though is that there is a row number,
Mhm.
which is an important part of this that determines whether, well, let me put it actually on the list so we can see this. The row number tells us which record, which row we need to grab. So in this case, you'll see that it's sequential, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. But if I move these around, if I change this one to 15, then I'm going to see which row 15 is blank. Let's try row 16. I'll see row 16 data
Mm.
because it's
Oh,
using get value looking at this. So
yeah.
it's going
So
down through
whatever that
one,
tells
two,
that
three, four.
calculation where to grab the data from, which one is
Mm-hmm.
responsible. Eh,
So, and this record, row number, is an auto enter serial number. So they need to be sequential, and we would need to make sure that we're resetting that number every time, or we set the number every time that we create those records, which you could do. You'd put in a counter variable and have it auto enter from the counter. It's just another way of doing it. But yeah, if I was anticipating a longer, more a lot more records, or wanted to have it variable, then I would have it create the records every time, and then delete your records when you're done with your session.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So, other questions? People are typing in questions. It's a good topic. It's a more advanced topic. Once again, it's why I bring Calvin in, because he gets into the deep end of the pool. My job is to ask questions, like Margaret's job is. Margaret's, got a good like intermediate level kind of understanding of stuff. So she asks, Margaret, you have questions?
I have one from David at the moment. Guess you could export the data and import it into a table instead of a virtual list. Perhaps virtual list is better and faster for user interaction.
So yeah, you could export this. So if we say export
Sounds like a
records
FileMaker
and
do trick or something. Yeah.
to automatically open.
That's how we used to take repeating fields and separate them if we had to separate them. We would export and there's an option when you export is to split. I think it's import or export. You can take a repeating set of data and split it into different records. It's how we would normalize data back in 1990.
Ooh, well, that didn't work. It put all of the data in one row.
Oh, that's a little unfortunate.
Yeah.
So
I
these are
don't think I realized that repeating fields would do that. It's interesting.
the stupid tricks we had to do to get FileMaker to do basic business was epic back in 1990. And progressively over the years, it's gotten less stupid, right? So it's like script triggers and all these sort of things that we really need. But having lateral control of data elements on the screen is not one they've ever saw fit to deal with. So I, to be honest with you, I'm glad we don't have to do all the stupid, because that's how we would normalize repeating field data. You do an import or export, and there's an option when you do that to take, I don't know if it's on the import side, export side. That's the way we would dump the data and then rerun the data through, export it, then re-import it, and then have it split it
Hmm.
so you could normalize. So if I have instead of having 100 partitions of a repeating field, you'd have 100 records. And then we could do inventory control, like basic counting of related data with that. Like if you wanted to count the quantity, like let's like it was the biggest turd ever to solve. Like, okay, so we have an invoice and we sell 12 widgets. how many widgets are in inventory anymore? Well, there was no way to do that. You had to take the invoice, take it as a repeating field, break it apart with a really script maker, the script. So we didn't have if statements back in the scripts, like if then and then loop.
Oh, you didn't have
That
if
didn't exist.
statements?
No, it didn't exist, right? I mean, literally, I had to walk uphill to school barefoot both ways in the snow, right? It just is the way it was. And the platforms got infinitely better and more powerful. This gives us tremendous power. It's just that we're starting to go and explore stupid tricks again because we're running into limitations, right? But it's a good conversation, a good sample to have. My job is to just point out, like, hey, what the hell does this make sense? And Peter or David, whoever asked about the 105 records, great catch, great catch. That's one of those little things that Calvin's like, please pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right? The original Wizard of Oz, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And then your dog Toto runs over and grabs the curtain and drags it around. Little Chihuahua dog.
I'll ask a silly question. I still don't totally understood how repeating fields stood in for relationships. Like, how did they enable you to do?
Well,
Calvin, do you want to explain how
yeah. So
why you're using
on
repeating field as
a
opposed to something else?
invoice, if we think of an invoice, I think if your intro to repeating fields is this layout right here, it would be
Yeah, that's
confusing.
bad. Stop. Let me do it. Just let me do it. I'm gonna channel 1990. This is the way stuff used to work. So I'm gonna come over here and we're using FileMaker 2. Okay. This is FileMaker Pro 2, 2.0. And it was the very first Windows version too. And we'd say start a blank file or a new blank file, work just like this. Okay. Understand that back in the day, there were no, so when you would come here, you had then I mean for your purposes, there were no relationships. And really there was only each FMP 12 file was a single table. Let's just set that aside. So what I have over here is I would have tables, I would have invoice, okay, and these would be two different files, but I'm going to put them in one file just to keep things simple. I'm going to change that. I'm going to say invoice. Actually, there wasn't
a second
there's no
table.
way to relate it, right? So you had invoices. That was it. Okay.
Now you want to put your line items in.
Okay. Yeah. No, I have to go over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all these. And then we didn't have primary keys like that because there was no such thing as relationship. There's no such thing as a key, really. So you'd have an invoice number, and then we would say name of the person who bought it, their address, the way they bought it. And then we would say the invoice SKU of the item, invoice item SKU. Okay, so here we go. Text field, create, options. There are no relationships.
Storage.
We need a repeating field wherever.
Storage. Third option over.
Is it this one?
There. Yep.
Yep, right here. And this was organized a little differently, but just so you know, auto enter looks almost. There were no calculations, but there were lookups. But this is why I call this the old school. This is fine, but this validation right here has almost changed zero from 1990. So anyway, auto enter validation storage. I want 20 items on my invoice. And you're like, there's your 20. So what, Margaret, test question. What boxes are in here and what's in the boxes? I don't say anything. What are those?
Those are text fields.
With how many repetitions?
Oh, so those all have no repetitions. Those are all just straight regular fields.
No repetitions.
Oh, they have one.
Yeah,
okay.
There you go.
What happens if you set it to 0? Nothing happens? Like the field?
Probably
It shouldn't let you save it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, so there you go. That's your limit.
Limit
right there. Okay, so I have invoice SKU. I have the item description. Okay, and then you have the item quantity and the item. I'll just say price for now, and then we can get an extended price. It doesn't really matter. So then I'm going to go over create it, and all these have to be 20. They're all going to be 20. I screwed this up. Double click, storage 20. Over here 20. So this is, and once again, this is. I'm not saying this is horrible. I'm just saying that this is the way it was. So I'm in a body. So top nav didn't. This would have been header in the old days. The header's still there, right? You could do a header. Claris does top nav because it's happier for iPhones and iPads. I'm going to delete it. And so then what you're over here and you're like, wow, this looks like because it defaulted to horizontal. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to these. I'm going to say Right side, and the inspectors weren't glued in here. They were floating. They were different spots, but you could find the control
I do
somewhere
remember putting
right here,
inspectors.
and you're doing vertical, right? So then you got this, you got the description. Oh, shoot, like this. And then you got the quantity, which would maybe been on the left, maybe, I don't know, whatever. You have the quantity, then you have the item price. You put that over here like that. And then so suddenly this starts to look like an invoice, right? With the lines down, right? See that, Margaret? How they start to look.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is right. It is. I get all that. So this is the beginning of your. This was how they built the CRM back 30 some odd years ago. And so the problem is that if you have a product here, and I have a, and so no, Clavin, in his 123 Maple Street, and I don't know, Germany, right somewhere. Okay, so and then he's got the SKU 5, product description, a jumbo play toy, not a pay toy, a play toy. They quantum. He wants 8 of them, and they're 45.99 US dollars a piece. Okay, there you go. That's the beginning of a flat file database, right?
Got it.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm just processing that portals are of course relationship required, like all
Because the
portals are.
portal is showing you related data, and because each of these is in a separate record, you can process them, you can report on them, you can sort on them, you can find, you can omit them. In here, if I put play in dough in here and I say blue, so Calvin is getting older, he's got some blue chews, and he needs like 110 pack of blue chews. Oh, that's SKU 110. Okay, you need 200 of them, and they are $2.95 per blue chew. Okay. Um, these two items cannot be separated. They are glued together forever. Okay.
Same field, even if the field is repeating.
It's
Okay.
the same field.
Yes.
It's just a different level of your shoebox. They're glued together. So you're like, well, how do we export this and separate it? So then you're like, okay, how do we export it? Well, go and export.
Someone said that if you export it as a CSV,
Let's do invoice, text, dump. Let's see. Tab separated files is great. I don't want to auto open. I don't particularly care. I'm going to say save. And then I'm going to move all. Okay, so you don't break them up here. So then we would export it all. I'm going to close. So that we have this file right here. So then we say we have the new, I'm going to create a brand new file. I'm going to say blank, and I'm going to call this separated line item. So we want to normalize it somehow, right? And so I'm going to create a brand new table. I'm going to call it separated line items. I get rid of all this. I'm going to say delete all of them. I'm going to say description. And this is actually kind of a really interesting technique. Some of you will see this here, and I don't, quantity, SKU, price. Okay, there we go. Good enough. All right, so we have this right here. So then we're in this file right here. I'm going to go to a table view so we can see it. I'm going to say file, manage, import, file. Okay, and I'm going to target the other FileMaker file, which was called, what do we call the other file, Margaret?
Untitled.
It was untitled. I'm going to say open. It's going to say add records. We're going to add records. Okay, then we have, let's see. So we've got the quantity is down. I think, how do we do this? This is this new system here, right? Quantity is there. There we go. Description is here. I keep thinking about the old system. Item price, and item SKU is here. SKU is there. Okay. And then you say,
Repeating fields right there.
This little comes up right here. It goes, you know that we could split them up over here? Did you know about that? Yeah. This is from FileMaker, before FileMaker 2. Before I actually ever went school uphill barefoot in the snow each way. Goes back to FileMaker probably Deluxe. People think I'm making a joke. There was a product called FileMaker Deluxe. Okay. So anyway, you can say import, and you're like, okay, hang on to your. And so it created 2 records. It split them. So it's one record here. And start splitting them. That's how we would normalize or split. Now, once it's over here, you can say, show me all the blue chews, show me all the play toys. Then you can manage
actually play with it like it's a
This
regular.
is why repeating fields suck so much. But why they were essential back 34 years ago. Yeah, back in these days, we were wizards to make something work properly. Yeah, I mean, people have always been, and I'll just leave you with this for the day. People always say like, "Oh my God, the new blah 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 is going to come out. The new AI is going to be in FileMaker, and it's going to remove the need for FileMaker developers." Listen, that has always been bullshit. Now I understand people being nervous about that, like, "Oh, well, look how easy FileMaker is." Listen, you have a customer that's going to spend 10,000, I'm going to pick a number, 10,000 US dollars on building a solution. That's not a lot of money, but 10,000 US dollars on a solution. Okay. And they're going to pay you to do that. From now, it might adjust for inflation because 10,000 today might have been, $5,000 20 or 30 years ago. But the point is each business is going to have a set amount of money they can spend on a solution. With better versions of FileMaker, that $10,000 goes farther. They're going to pay you 10,000 every time. Every time they're going to pay you that, always. That's why I'm still in business. That's why Calvin's still here. He's been here for 15, 20 years, whatever it's been. They're always going to pay you that money. But because you're using new software, like someone the other day said, "Hey, can you help me build some new features in FileMaker 11?" I went, "Dude, I don't have a computer that'll run FileMaker 11, right? Invest in new versions of product and take the same amount of money that you would have spent otherwise and spend it in the new version and look how much further you're going to go in making a great solution." Well, I could be a
Yeah, AI it seems to promise that it's going to do everything for us, but when I've looked at AI, you have to do a lot of work to get an answer from it that's useful. Which in some cases it's worth the effort,
Yep.
and it will save you time in the long run. But it's not like you can't just go to it and say, "Hey, build me a FileMaker solution," and it's just going to spit something out.
Well, that's because of sci-fi, right? So the other day I was watching an old Star Trek
Enhance.
episode. Yeah, no, yeah, and it was Deep Space Nine, and they go, "I need a database, a cross-reference every time that a ship has come in, and then people disappeared off the ship because they were murdered and vaporized or something." And the computer goes, "Assembling database. It'll be approximately 5 hours before the database is ready for use." Okay, AI is not that.
No, you have to even know what the correct question is to even ask.
Yes. And yet then you have to explain to the computer that question. AI is not self-aware, at least none of the stuff that we have with open AI chat or any of that stuff. Would like to know what upgrades are in place versus a new install. Can I get more clarification on that, Lynn, from you? I just don't, it's not, the question is not.
It's about FileMaker Server. Is it better to upgrade from FileMaker Server 19 to 23, or is it better to do a fresh install of FileMaker Server?
Do a fresh one. Jacob Taylor would tell you that you can do the upgrade and it'll probably work.
Probably. That's the scary word.
But he gets like religion about that. And then right about the time he tells everyone it works, then it blows up in his face. All right, cool. That's it for today, everyone.
Good. Yeah,
if you have a question or topic, send an email to support@rcconsulting.com. And it's for tomorrow. We're going to write down the OData. I know some of you want to talk about that. It's really deep. I'm going to make sure that we have the correct person. I don't do OData every day, so I have to find someone who does it every day who really loves it, and then they can talk about it in depth. All right, cool.
Yep. All right. Have a good one, everybody.
See ya.
Bye-bye.